Hey, so thanks for joining us. We're going to have a conversation today about grants, about how you get a grant for your shelter or your rescue organization. A lot of people are intimidated by this process, and so I invited two really talented people here to talk about that. I've got Meredith, who is a volunteer. She's a board member. She was supposed to be the transport coordinator, but kind of does everything, which doesn't surprise me at all, having met her, for Corinth Alcorn Shelter in Mississippi. And then Nicole is also here. She is a professional and volunteer grant writer, and she helped Meredith and Corinth Alcorn secure some grants. So they've had some success, and I think they have a lot to offer. So we're just going to walk through. So first, I want Meredith, I'd love for you to just tell us a little bit about what Corinth Alcorn is and what it's up against and what their needs are or were or continue to be.
Yeah, no, well, first of all, thank you for inviting me and having me today. Super excited to talk about this particular subject. So the Corinth Alcorn Animal Shelter is located in Corinth, Mississippi. So we are more of what I would call a rural, sub-rural, perhaps, shelter. So we're not near any major cities, anything like that. And so a lot of times shelters in rural areas have a different set of issues than shelters in the city. But like a lot of shelters in the South and in rural areas, we have a lack of funding and resources. So we do get some funding from the city and county because we've got contracts to take animals with them. However, you know, those contracts and funds don't completely cover the cost to take care of an animal through its entire stay at the shelter. And so that's kind of where we end up with this need to fill the funding gap, right? So you know, things like obviously fundraisers and whatnot, but then grants as well. You know, we wanted to really start taking a look at applying for different grants and those kind of things and seeing if we can have any success with that, because there are quite a few grants out there for shelters and rescues. And it's just a matter of sifting through all the different grants out there and the applications. And it can be a kind of a lengthy process. And it certainly helps having Nicole on board with us, because she's really got she's really mastered how to put things together when it comes to answering the questions on these applications, because some of them are quite detailed and lengthy. And I think she's kind of got a good grasp on what these organizations that are doing the funding, what they're looking for as far as answers go. So that's kind of where we're at the moment. Our biggest need at the moment is trying to get into a new shelter. We've got the building. It's just been a long road getting into it. But it is desperately needed, because the building that we are currently in was built a few years before the Civil War. So 1800s. It was a hospital, I believe, during the war. It's been a poorhouse. It's been a schoolhouse. The last 20 to 30 years, it's been a shelter off and on. And Kara, as you know, the roof is literally falling in on our building. So that was probably the most pressing need that we have. And that was one reason why I kind of went on a search to see if I could find somebody to help us write these grants, because getting the rest of the money that we need to move into this building is priority number one. Because if we don't do that, we're going to be in deep trouble, because we've got to get out of that building. As you know, it's
before the roof falls, probably.
Literally the roof and the floor, you know, and I'm sure you saw places where there were huge holes in the floor.
Oh my gosh, unbelievable. I'm just astonished that you're still in that building and that they haven't been able to get a roof. Okay, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on how you found it. One of the challenges for a shelter is finding somebody to help them with their grants, because there are tips, as you alluded to, and there are some tricks, and we're going to share some of those. Nicole's going to share some of her secrets with us today. But how can a shelter, so maybe Nicole can speak to this, but how can a shelter find a grant writer or find someone to do what you and Meredith have done?
Sure. Well, I think Meredith and I met somewhat serendipitously, and I don't know, it's not a guaranteed success story for everybody, but it is a good example. We have a friend in common through all of Meredith's work. She does, among many other things, transport, and she transports animals all the way out of Mississippi up to the state of Wisconsin, which is where I live. And we had a friend in common, someone that I know through the local animal rescue network, which I'm very, clicked into because of my love and, passion for this type of work. And I remember getting a text message from this mutual friend named Lindsay, and she said, Nicole, this is Meredith. Can you help her? Kind of out of nowhere. I think I had expressed to this friend of ours, Lindsay, that I'd be available to write grants as a volunteer, something I'd never done before. But I do write grants as a professional for a local nonprofit in the human social services here in Wisconsin. I do have experience and some confidence doing that, which I recognize it takes some confidence and experience to just kind of plunge into this. But that's how we can help. There's an incredible resource guide that Kara will share with all kinds of information about how to do this well. So anyway, this was my entree into volunteering as a grant writer, and we just connected, and I think we shared a lot of information initially through emails. I basically started, I think, by saying, tell me your story, because telling a story is so critical to writing a successful grant. I kept thinking when Meredith was just explaining about the status of the current shelter, its physical situation with the roof caving in, I really held on to that, and I thought if we could convey that through a grant application, just how serious and desperate the situation is, I think that will increase our odds of bringing in some funding. So far, so good. In several grant applications I've written, I have had an opportunity to talk and describe the terrible situation of the current shelter, its physical location. Sorry, that's my rescue lab in the back that you hear rolling around. And being able to, again, to convey through photographs and words why they need funding so badly. And I think that really helps. That doesn't mean you have to have a shelter that's falling apart to get a grant, but it's just a good example of how the better a job you can do of describing the need, I think the more likely it is that possibly you could bring in some funding.
That's how a lot of things work, having a story that people connect with, whether it's the people assessing grants or whatever. If you can weave a storyline of some kind of you're looking for a spay and neuter, maybe the story of a mama dog who's or people who keep dropping off puppies every 6 months at the shelter, like weaving some kind of storyline into your grant is going to make it stand out and seem more need, bigger need for sure. Like saying that the roof is literally falling in at Alcorn, and literally I have pictures of the room that was flooding from the roof when we were there and it was raining, and we helped carry puppies out, and that was 2 years ago, so they've been limping along. So awesome. So if you find somebody, and I don't know who, like what are your tips or your suggestions for finding these people? So if you're a shelter and you don't know a Nicole, don't have a connection to a Nicole, how do you find one?
I can take that. I think, well, my suggestions, I'll start off and Meredith may have more. I think working with the current network you have in your community that, is based around your shelter. I mean, board of director members, if you even have a board, I know not many shelters don't, but if you do, I mean, I think that, these individuals decided to join the board because they care, they have a passion. Typically they have some financial support, but maybe they know somebody. So asking anybody affiliated with your organization, if they know anyone who would be comfortable writing a grant. Does not have to be someone who has experience writing a grant, but a lot of people just like writing. Whether it's creative writing or journaling or what have you, or they write in any capacity for their daytime job. Anyone who feels that they could take that on, or at least try to convince them to give it a shot. There's, again, all kinds of resources and tips for writing a good grant, but finding that first person within your local network who would be willing to try it out. So my advice, step one, would be to ask anybody and everyone associated with your shelter and your community, even if they don't want to do it. Maybe they know someone who knows someone, even someone in a different state or part of the country who does it. It's a connection. And I think we could pull more people out of the woodwork who are willing to do this if they had a better sense of what a difference it can make.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who say to us when we travel and we meet, I don't know how I can help. I live in Oregon or whatever. I don't know how I could possibly help these shelters down here. And here you're in Wisconsin and you're helping a shelter in Mississippi. So there are lots of opportunities. And that's one of the things that we try to do at Who Will Let the Dogs Out, is try to connect people who have skills and want to help, because there's something everybody can do. And here's a really clear one. If you have writing skills, if you have grant writing skills, great. But if you don't, if you just have writing skills, if you have a passion for this, then you're a person who could help write grants. That's what you're saying, basically, right?
Absolutely. Reach out to all your local connections first. But also a lot of rescues, at least in this area, a lot of rescues and shelters have partner rescues and shelters up north and in Wisconsin. And a lot of those shelters that you're sending to are usually relatively well funded. And they usually have a big network, and which is what I did. I started reaching out to all of our partners and said, can anybody point me in the right direction, help me with this? And I looked up and we found we had a mutual connection, in Nicole. And so I would say, reach out to your partners that are doing really well. Reach out to your partners and ask them, hey, have you guys been writing grants? If you have, can you help me with that, or know somebody that does? And 9 times out of 10, they know, and they will do anything to help you. And then 2, my second, I didn't actually do this, but this was my next step. If after reaching out to my partners didn't yield anything, the next thing I was going to do is put the call out on social media, on the shelter page, on my personal page, have all the board members do it, put the call out, because I've done that before several years ago with a different organization looking for somebody. We needed a virtual online volunteer just to do paperwork for us. I put it out on social media, and somebody I had never even met, who was working with a golden retriever rescue in New Jersey or New York, I can't remember which, reached out to me and said, I want to help you with this. And so she worked with us for a couple of years doing just online paperwork, basically. And so there's a lot of, to your point, Kara, there's a lot of people out there in different states that want to help. And it's just a matter of reaching out to your partner network, I think, and then putting the call out on social media, explaining what it is you need and who to contact. And I would guarantee you, if you do those 2 things, I'd be willing to bet you'd find somebody that could help you, or at least get you going in the right direction.
Yeah. Great advice. Great advice. I'm just asking, naming a need. I think a lot of times on shelters, all the time, we just say we want help. That's not going to get you help. You have to name a specific need, and then you do get people that may not have thought they could help that can help.